A friend of ours pointed out that there is a production of Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot that has been canceled because Beckett. So this is like classic, awesome frickin' play from sort of theater of the absurd genre, and Beckett, who is now dead, required that the characters, it's basically just two characters. There are a couple other really bit players, but it's Vladimir and Estragon, I want to say, yeah. And Pozo, that they be male. And I don't know, when I first heard it, I was like, oh, I guess, maybe. But whatever, Beckett was the playwright, and he said it has to be male, and he's gone now, and I think it's his son who oversees his estate, and there was some play being done, some production of Godot being done, in which many of the people behind the scenes, many of the people who were not on the stage were actually female, and there was no injunction against that, but they were abiding by Beckett's rules that the actors, the characters are male, and they actually be played by male actors, and it was shut down because this is somehow non-equitable. Right, non-equitable, not fair, not okay, because we need to be present in everything, no matter what. And this is not the story that we want to spend a lot of time talking about today. But my God, people, like, seriously, not everyone gets to show up in every place at every moment. The idea that women need to be allowed to be playing characters that were written as male characters in a play in which the playwright said, these are actually male characters and they need to be played by male characters, is a little bit like, and I will probably take some shit for this, but a little bit like men who are dressed up as women claiming that they need to be allowed into women's music festivals or women's domestic crisis centers or women's sports, right? Like, nope. Actually, there's rules. And sometimes the rules aren't what you like, and you're going to have to deal with that.
I mean, it invalidates the entire purpose of the exercise, right? It makes
the playwright or the
desire to impose rules on any given play that require openness to people of configurations, there are no children in the play, right?
Yes. No one in a wheelchair in the play.
Right. This is, it's the perfect example of sophistry.
Yes.
Right, because the whole point of the play is to actually say something, or in Beckett's case, in a strange way, not to say something, but
to explore the nature of waiting and infinity and expectation and hope and humanity and all of these things.
It's not a job.
It's simultaneously a tiny play in terms of like what happens and the scope of space that is traveled, and enormous. It's like it's infinite in its implications. And sorry, I interrupt you, but I feel like I haven't gone back and reread it, but this is when I love this play. I have it. I actually have 2 copies of it. I found it also in another anthology of plays on our shelf here. It feels to me like it's explicitly a non-sexual play, right? And so I think that, it's not mine to say, but I think that Godot would work if it were all female.
Well,
but okay, yes, and there's homosexual attraction. I don't care, right? Like, I think given that most of the world is heterosexual, and given that once you have mixed sex groups interacting in a very sparse place, you raise this question of like, oh, well, what did that mean? What was that about? Was that interest? What is going on there? And so this like saying like, no, you know what? It's all male. And I think you could equally well say, no, it's all female, except I didn't write the play, so I don't get to say that. But I think that this would work equally well as it just like, you know what? It's just going to be all one thing so that we don't raise the question.
So that issue is not central to the play.
Yes.
But so first off, I think it is perfectly within bounds for Beckett to say this should be staged as males only.
Totally.
I think it is perfectly valid for somebody who wishes to stage the play to say, I know what the playwright's wishes were, but it's not his to say, I'm going to stage it female or I'm going to stage it mixed sex. I wouldn't.
Apparently, the estate doesn't let that happen. Apparently, it's still somehow, I don't know the rules.
So
right?
there are legal bits, but at the moment that this becomes public domain because it's existed too long,
You can do what you want.
I would not fault anybody for violating the playwright's wishes, but I do think you ought to do that consciously. You ought to say, here's why, right? Here's why I'm doing that.
And the show notes should say, if you have flaunted those things legally, then you should acknowledge that.
But that's all in the scope. I will point out there is one section of the play that I recall that would have to be refigured for female characters.
Okay.
If I am remembering correctly, I hope I have this correct, but I probably haven't read it since high school. But there's a point at which the futility of Waiting for Godot causes the characters to toy with the idea of suicide by hanging, and one of the arguments in favor is that it will give them erections, if I remember correctly.
I think that does happen.
Am I wrong?
I also did not go back, but
I think it's in there,
and I'm not going to be able to find it quickly.
And look, I'm totally open, as we I think talked about last week, to refiguring of things like plays where Romeo and Juliet is radically refigured in West Side Story, for example.
Yeah.
And so I'm up for a radical refiguring of this, and it would be interesting to have females have that discussion and then realize that, in fact, that was not an argument in favor because, of course, it wouldn't work. Right? You could do that. So anyway, it's all available for the refiguring, but nonetheless, the idea that the play is invalid because it is inherently about males is preposterous. Some things are.
Totally preposterous. Yep.